Hello students, today we're going to look at chapter 8 section 1, which is adding and subtracting polynomials. But before we can add and subtract polynomials, we got to figure out what polynomials are, and we've got a whole bunch of vocabulary and stuff to learn first. So the first thing that we need to know is what a monomial is. Okay? And monomial, the important part is the prefix mono, meaning single or one. Okay? A monomial is a number, a variable, or the product of a number and variable. So for example, a monomial could be 3, or a monomial could be x squared, because that's a number or a variable, but it also could be 32xyz, because that's a number, a variable, or that's a product of a number or variable. Okay? So each one of those is a monomial. It's important to understand what a monomial is, because we have to know what a monomial is in order to be able to identify a polynomial. Okay? Again, a monomial is a number, a variable, or the product of numbers and variables. So all of those are monomials. Now, part of knowing a monomial excuse me, is finding the degree of the monomial. Okay? The degree of a monomial is the sum of the exponents of the variables. Okay? To find the degree of a monomial, I look at the exponents of the variables. It doesn't matter if there's an exponent on a number. I only look at the exponents of the variables, I add them together, and that's the degree. So, for example, on 3x squared, the degree is 2. Because there's only one variable, and its exponent is 2, so the degree is 2. If I have 4xy to the third z squared, then I look at all of the variables, x, y, and z, and add up their exponents. The variable of the the exponent for the x is 1. So 1 plus 3 plus 2, the degree equals 6. Again, I'm only looking at the variables and adding their exponents. If I have just a number, like 4, there is no degree to 4. Okay? So I can only find the degree by looking at the variables and adding the exponents of each of the variables. Now that we understand everything we need to know about monomials, we can now look at polynomials. So we're going to say a polynomial, spelling there, a polynomial is the sum of monomials. Simple as that. If I have a series of monomials that are being added together or subtracted, because subtraction is the same as adding, then that would create a polynomial. So for instance, 3x squared plus 4y is a polynomial. This is a monomial, and that is a monomial, so I have two monomials being added together. That makes it a polynomial. And this is a special kind of polynomial. It's called a binomial because there are two terms in the polynomial. Each one of these would be considered a term. Okay? So I have two monomials added together creates a binomial, and each one of those is called a term. So if I have something like 4m squared minus 3m minus 8, is that a polynomial? Absolutely, it's a polynomial. I have three monomials. They're added together. It's subtraction. Subtraction is the same as adding the negative. So it creates a polynomial. This is a special kind of polynomial. It's called a trinomial because there are three terms in the polynomial. Bi meaning two terms, Tri meaning 3 terms. Each one of those is a term, and since there are 3 of them, it's called a trinomial. Now to find the degree of a polynomial, this can get, so I'm going to use a different color. The degree of a polynomial. Okay? The simplest way to say it is to find the degree of each term, and then the biggest one wins. Okay? So we'll write that. Find the degree of each term and the biggest number wins. That's obviously not a mathematical definition, but it's what we can learn it from. So I'm going to look at these 2 polynomials that I have here, and we're going to look at what degree they are. So I find the degree of each term. So the degree of this term is 2, and the degree of this term is 1. So the degree of the binomial is 2, because the largest one is 2. That's it. Now let's look at this trinomial. The degree of this term is 2. The next thing we need to look at is standard form of a polynomial, because we have to know standard form of a polynomial in order to find its leading coefficient. Okay? So standard form of a polynomial. Standard form of a polynomial means that the terms are in order by the exponent of one of the variables. So I have to put the terms in order by one of the variables. For instance, let's say I'm given 3x plus 7x to the third minus 25 plus 30x squared. It is a polynomial. I know it's a polynomial because I have 4 monomials that are being added together. Now, standard form of this would mean I have to find one of those x variables and put them in order from greatest to least of their exponent. So my variable is x, and so the largest exponent is to the third, so I start with 7x to the third. And then I go to the second one, which would be plus 3x squared, and then I go to plus 3x and minus 25. So I'm in chronological order going down or descending from 3 to 1 and then no x at all. That is standard form of a polynomial. Now, to find the leading coefficient, the leading coefficient is always the coefficient of the first term when it's in standard form. Okay? The coefficient of the first term in standard form. So 7 in this case is my leading coefficient. Now, all of those vocabulary that we've had to learn, a monomial, degree of a monomial, polynomial, degree of a polynomial, the different types of polynomials, binomial, trinomial, monomial, and standard form of a polynomial and the leading coefficient are going to help us as we prepare to do all the stuff that we're going to do with polynomials for the rest of the year. And so now we're going to look at how to add and subtract those now that we know all of this stuff. Now we're to the meat of the whole concept, adding and subtracting polynomials. I have a polynomial, 2x squared plus 5x minus 7. I have another polynomial, 3 minus 4x squared plus 6x. Just a quick review. What is the degree of this whole polynomial? You're right, it's 2, because the degree is 2, 1, and 2 is the biggest number. What's the degree of this polynomial? It's also 2, because the degree of this term is 2, the degree of this term is 1, the degree of this term is 0, so 2 wins. What's the leading coefficient of this one? You're right, it's 2. What's the leading coefficient of this one? Trick question. The leading coefficient of this one is -4, because if I write it in standard form, it's -4x squared plus 6x plus 3, which would mean the leading coefficient is -4. Be careful with those. Now let's add them. Adding polynomials is all about adding like terms. A like term, you'll remember, is exactly the same variable. The variables have to have exactly the same exponents. Everything has to be the same. So I have 2x squared. Do I have another x squared over here? Absolutely. So 2x squared plus -4x squared is -2x squared. 5x plus 6x would be plus 11x. And -7 plus 3 is -4. So the sum of those two polynomials is -2x squared plus 11x minus 4. It's simply adding like terms. And now we're going to subtract polynomials. I have a polynomial here, and I have a polynomial here. Quick review, what's the degree of this polynomial? 3, you're right. What's the degree of this polynomial? 2, that is correct. Leading coefficient of this one? 4. Leading coefficient of this one? Is 3. Great, so now let's subtract them. When we subtract, we want to pay close attention to this minus sign because we're subtracting everything that's inside this parentheses, somewhat of the distributive property. But we also need to put our answer in standard form. So I'm going to start with the largest exponent. The largest exponent is p to the third. I have 4p to the third. Do I have any other p to the thirds? No, so I just write down 4p to the third. The next one is p squared. I only have 1p squared. Here's the tricky part. I'm subtracting that 3p squared, so it has to be minus 3p squared. Because I have nothing over here that's p squared, but I have nothing minus 3p squared is negative 3p squared. Now we're just going to look at the p's. 7p minus negative 9p is plus 16p. Because 7 minus negative 9 is the same as 7 plus 9, which is 16. And then negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10. So now I have my polynomial in standard form, which is how my answers must be. Leading coefficient is 4. Degree is 3. It's not called a quadrinomial because we don't usually say those. It's just a polynomial with 4 terms. And finally, here are your 3 practice problems for tonight. The first one says write in standard form. So write this polynomial in standard form. And after you've done that, identify the leading coefficient and the degree. The second one is to add these 2 binomials. And the third one is to subtract these 2 trinomials. Once you've gotten all your answers, please take a picture of your practice problem and submit it through Edmodo.